Hey everybody, thanks so much for jumping into the Post Frame podcast. Today we've got a special guest who's been here for 36 years, so I'll let him introduce himself and share all the different roles he's had at FBI buildings and the knowledge that he's incurred with Post Frame through those years. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Brian Schuh, and I've been here, like I said, 36 years. I've done everything from started on a new construction crew to the Aspen side, the commercial side of it. I've been the service. I spent the majority of my time in the repair renovation side, and now I'm doing underground utility locate, the private part of the underground utility, and checking job sites, laying out the buildings ahead of the crew's arrival to the building site.
Yeah, so I would argue that you're one of the most experienced and knowledgeable post-frame repair specialists in the nation. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I would like to think so. I've been doing it a long time.
Yeah, no, for sure. So we're gonna stay in the post-frame repair innovation side in this conversation. So the first question that I want to ask is, what is the most common mistake people make when picking out a building location for their project?
I would say conditions. I mean, obviously, people don't think sometimes of underground stuff that's there. Most of your residential type stuff, there's always a septic field, there's always a swimming pool, a small outbuilding that's either got power or gas, something running to those. Once they pick the location and you get started and it's on top of one of those things, then it gives us trouble, and it's not only dangerous, but it's extremely costly to the customer once you're started and you find those things later on.
Yeah, so how can that become costly to the customers? They're thinking about like, hey, like how does that actually incur cost in my project?
Well, not only does it stop you when you get into, if you was to hit a gas line or a electric, something like that, or even a septic field for that matter, those things stop progress on the building for one, and now we've got to figure out, is there a way to repair what we've done, or do we actually have to move site? Those things all are extra cost above and beyond what was originally quoted for the building. So that's where the cost comes in. All that gets thrown into a change order type thing, and then you get an extra cost in all that.
Yeah. So when it comes to actually picking the location of the project and then the site prep, what have you seen? What some advice would you give people as they're preparing their site for their project to start?
Obviously you want to try to find a level site that's on high enough ground that you don't have water issues, water draining towards your building site. The backfill that you use to bring the site up, if the site isn't level, obviously you want to use some type of material that's going to drain, gravel, sand, something on that order, even clay if it's compacted well. Clay is just harder to compact. And if you're using a stone, you want to use something with fines in it, and you don't want to use more than about a foot of like what we would call number 2, or it's a 2-inch, 3-inch stone. You start getting more of that with less fines, and then you start having cave-in problems. And then there again, all that stuff is extra time, extra cost that ends up on a change order.
When you say
hours to dig the holes because they're collapsing on you, so it takes you a lot longer to get them dug and to get studs set and different things like that.
Yeah, so when you say cave-in problems, you're talking about when they're doing the dig in, right? And they pull out, and that kind of can cave in.
When the auger's pulled out, it doesn't have a bunch of fines and compacted well, it tends to collapse, and then those end up giving us trouble, extra hours on digging and trying to set stubs and different things like that.
Yeah, so what would you say is the best material to use for a site pad?
Obviously, clay is real good if it's compacted, but it almost takes heavy equipment to do that. For commercial, some of the big ag, that stuff's available, but residential, it's a little harder to get that done. And I would say probably some kind of road mix as far as gravel road mix to bring up your pad. If you're going to do a residential type pad, you're limited on what kind of equipment you can use to compact the material.
Gotcha.
That's the biggest thing, is getting it compacted well.
Right. So when it comes to locates, you kind of touched on this a little bit ago. What are some misconceptions people might not understand about the risks of not locating things, or maybe not understanding what that even means? What are you trying to locate, and how does that relate to a construction project?
Well, for our side of it, we're required to, by law, to have the public locate gets done, and that's by calling, each state's got its own thing, you know, it's like 811, I think, in Indiana, Julie or something like that over in Illinois. Those things, they'll come in and they'll locate to your meter. So if you have a line that runs to an outbuilding, from your house to an outbuilding, or from your house to a swimming pool, things like that, they don't locate any of that. And I think people seem to think, hey, I have it located, and then there's nothing there. They won't locate their septic field. They won't locate any of that kind of stuff. They just locate their line that comes from the street or whatever to your meter.
And so, what might the risk be for some people who aren't experienced the type of stuff? They're like, okay, so what does that mean? What's the risk of not locating those private?
Those private lines, well, obviously damaged, because when we dig, obviously electric's going to be hazardous to us for one, gas, those type of things, but the damage, that falls back on the customer, you know. Now he's got a damaged line to a gas or electric to his outbuilding or whatever, and that's another cost that not necessarily goes through us as a change order, but he has to hire a private contractor to come in and fix his gas line or his electric line, and it's just an extra cost that ends up in there.
Because how deep are those lines typically?
Normally, like your public lines all have a certain depth that they're supposed to be set at. Not that they are, but they 9 times out of 10 they are. Private lines, there's really no guideline on. I've seen private lines anywhere from just a few inches to several feet.
Right. So we're going 4 feet down. So
yes,
we're going to hit everything. Is that fair to say?
4 foot deep, you're going to get most. Water line, you may miss a water line.
Gotcha.
That is another thing that people do think you can locate. Plastic, you can't locate a plastic line. So with the equipment that we have, so you either have to completely take the line apart and run a wire through the line to actually put a signal to that wire and trace it that way. That is the only way to trace like a plastic water line, unless it's got a trace wire that's ran with the line.
Gotcha. So for some people who don't know, you started at FBI going and doing locates how long ago?
4 years ago now.
And that was really around everything we've talked about, right? Trying to eliminate the risks to the customers, eliminate the risks of safety for our crews.
We've gotten into some underground utilities that were private utilities, and that's, I think, when we made the declaration that we were going to do that. And I think we started out hiring them done, because the private side of it, those are hired. The public side of it are free, calling them. So we started out hiring them, and I think we found out that we're getting more out of it by someone laying out buildings, checking sites, and doing locate is where we're really gaining a benefit from.
Yeah, so you go out and stake the site, the floor plan as well.
Right, correct. Or if it's on concrete, you check the foundation to make sure what we have listed on our drawings, so that if we need to make any changes, we can make those ahead of the crew showing up. And there again, we got more downtime and things like that. So.
Yeah, and so another thing too, if you're a commercial project or a suburban project that has a set timeline, right? If you're hitting something, that can really slow your project down.
Yeah, because some of your electric and stuff, it's tough to get ComEd or one of the other electric companies out there right away. I mean, you may set a week before they can get to something that you've damaged. Now, not only do you have the damage, but you've got just downtime, whatever that power's running or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. One thing too that I found a lot that most people are not aware of is the concept of finished floor. So could you try to explain what is, as you talked about site prep and getting your pad done, what is finished floor? And do you mind kind of breaking that down of what that means? Because you have to establish that a lot as you go out.
Correct. That's part of what I do. If I can meet with the customer, we go over where the corners of the building are, get that laid out, establish a finished floor mark, because everything we do is going to be your building that you buy. You bought a certain height of building and everything, and it all is based off of that finished floor mark. So if you bought a 12-foot high interior clearance and all your door heights and everything, let's say you got 10-foot doors, all that is established off of that. That's why we have to have that mark. And it is, some people are having a hard time understanding top of the concrete floor. So, and it doesn't necessarily have to be concrete. You could be leaving a gravel floor in there, but we still need to know top of floor elevation, and because everything we do is set off of that top of floor mark.
And that might not sound like well, okay, well, you're off a couple inches. So for someone who doesn't understand construction, how how massive is that then?
Yeah, well, it's a big deal, because if we get that wrong, if there's not a clear understanding between the customer and us on that elevation, your guy comes to put your overhead doors in or what have you, and now it's lacks 2 inches of reaching the header, or vice versa, it overlaps the header by, you don't have the heights that you intended to have. It can really mess you up on what it costs you, for one, and secondly, you may not be able to get the equipment in that you were intending to get into the building. So that is probably one of the most important things, is making sure we all understand what finished floor is and where that is. We try to put a permanent mark that's going to be there completely through the project until the project's completed, so that we can reference back to that at any reason or any time that we need to.
For sure. So last question here, and this is kind of a bonus question I didn't inform you of ahead of time, so I'll put you on the spot. I've heard that you are the roof leak or water leak specialist when it comes to post frame projects. So if there's a leak, you're the guy to call, and you can always find it. So is there a piece of advice you'd give to customers who maybe have a leak on their project, or feel like they have a leak and they're trying to discover or find it themselves, that you can share to kind of help people out as they try to understand that process?
Well, water leaks, basically, gravity is going to affect the water. Wind pressure, different things, all that stuff affects the way water moves. But coming off a roof, mainly it's going to run downhill. Something may divert it. But the biggest thing that helps find those is if we have a location where they see the water dripping on the floor. It just makes it a whole lot easier to find. If someone can tell you that it's 10 foot off of this wall and 8 foot off of that wall is where we had a puddle of water so big, all those things give you some kind of idea of, okay, there's a lot of water, so it's probably something fairly big, or there's very little water, so it's going to be something pretty small that you're looking for, and it narrows it down, because some of these buildings are so big that you just find out that you have a roof leak, and they don't give you some type of a spot to start looking. I mean, it can be real difficult finding.
Yeah.
Difficult finding.
Because, like you said, where there's the puddle does not mean
No.
straight up above is the leak, right?
No, because it can run down a lumber, a ceiling in a building, it drip on a ceiling and run 10, 12, 15 feet, whatever, before it finds a spot to come out of. So those type of things you got to try to think through of, okay, if it was on something, where would it run? And having a location will help you narrow it down.
Yeah, for sure. Well, awesome. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate you sharing your knowledge of 36 years in the industry and what you've learned in that regard. So we hope this was kind of educational for you guys when it comes to locates, understanding private versus public locates, how to think through your site prep, and even how to try to find a leak if you're struggling with that on your projects. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.